Let's get right into it. The collapse of China's local banks, this isn't just another economic downturn.
No, our source material frames this as something much, much bigger. Think of it as a warning sign, like the first tremor before the real earthquake, the one that could shake the entire system to its very foundations.
So let's really dive into what's going on here. The source argues this isn't a surface-level problem. They call it a deep-seated root disease, and it's something that directly threatens China's political stability.
And we're not just talking about a few bad loans. What we're really looking at here is a perfect storm. You've got a massive real estate bust, a declining population, and a deep corrosive public mistrust in the financial system, all hitting at the exact same time. It's a heck of a combination.
So you have to ask, right, how did these banks, which are so crucial to local economies, get so incredibly vulnerable? Well, it all boils down to a pretty simple, but as it turns out, deeply flawed economic engine that was running for decades. Yeah, for decades. The whole business model for literally thousands of these local banks was, well, this. Simple. You could boil it all down to one very lucrative and what everyone thought was a foolproof partnership. They were basically just the money machine for local government development projects.
And it was supposed to be this perfect perpetual motion machine. Here's how it worked. Local governments would sell land to developers. That cash funded the government. Then, the banks would lend even more money against the rising value of that land. Developers would take that loan, build more stuff, which pushed property prices even higher, and boom, the cycle just kept repeating. What could possibly go wrong?
Well, turns out a lot. Because that machine needed constant fuel to keep running. And as you can see, the tank is bone dry. The population growth that drove all that urbanization, it's reversed. The demand for all those new apartments, it's just evaporated. And that bulletproof belief everyone had that real estate could never lose value, yeah, that got completely shattered by one giant developer bankruptcy after another.
So here's the bottom line, the really crucial point. When the property market finally imploded, the value of the collateral, all that land and all those buildings that backed up the loans, it imploded right along with it. And that left the banks holding this enormous mountain of bad debt. They were, for all intents and purposes, bankrupt.
Okay, so this is where it gets really interesting. You might be wondering, if things are so bad, why haven't we seen total panic? Why no massive bank runs? Well, it turns out a series of government policies didn't just fail to fix the problem, they actually made things catastrophically worse. Basically, Chinese citizens are trapped. Think about it. You can't trust the deposit insurance. You can't get real information because any bank failure is treated like a state secret. You're definitely not allowed to protest, and good luck trying to move your money out of the country. There are just no easy exits. And this quote just nails it. It really does. All that pressure is just building and building inside the system. And by refusing to let any of it out, by plugging all the little leaks, the system is setting itself up for a much, much more explosive rupture down the road. So let's talk about these policy blunders, because they're huge. First up, after decades of cheering on this exact model, the government suddenly, abruptly, just slams on the brakes. They cut off real estate lending. And that one decision instantly froze the entire system that these banks needed to survive. It was like they just killed them overnight. And get this, while that was happening, they were also letting local governments rack up these insane amounts of hidden debt. We're talking about off-the-books borrowing that's so opaque, it doesn't even show up in the official stats. And guess who was funding all of it? Yep, the same local banks that were already on life support. Then, right at the moment when you would think transparency is absolutely crucial to restore some confidence, the government chose the exact opposite path. Censorship, information blackouts. And in doing so, they just torched the one thing any financial system needs to survive: trust. And to top it all off, they basically let a whole ecosystem of unregulated shadow banks just run wild. These were outfits offering these crazy high-interest wealth management products. They took people's life savings and funneled the cash straight into the absolute riskiest property deals you can imagine. And now, a lot of those investments are completely worthless. So when you add all that up, the crucial point becomes pretty clear. This isn't a problem you can just paper over with a simple bailout anymore. The source is arguing that the entire structure is just fundamentally structurally broken. And let's just tick off the reasons why. The value of that real estate collateral, it's gone. and it's not coming back. The main borrowers, the local governments themselves, are flat broke. Depositors, even though they're trapped, are quietly siphoning what they can to safer, state-owned banks. On top of that, these same banks are being forced to pay for rising social security costs. And the big one, the central government just doesn't have the money to bail out thousands of local banks across the country.
It means they're trapped. The whole system has entered what the source calls a doom loop. It's a total catch-22. If they try to save the banks, they risk a currency collapse. If they let the banks fail, they risk massive social unrest. Every single path they could take seems to make the overall problem even worse.
And that brings us to the final and honestly the most critical question in all of this. How does a banking crisis, as bad as it is, transform into a full-blown political crisis, one that could actually threaten the regime itself?
Well, the source lays out this really plausible and frankly frightening three-step scenario. It starts small. You get sporadic bank runs, kind of like what we saw in Hainan province back in 2022, but they start spreading. That triggers a chain reaction of local governments going bankrupt, unable to even pay their own employees. But the final step, it isn't some big violent uprising. It's something much quieter.
And that's this concept of hollowing out. The real danger here isn't a big dramatic revolution in the streets. It's a slow, quiet collapse from the inside. It's the elites quietly moving their money and their families out of the country. It's local officials who just start ignoring orders from Beijing. And it's a general public that has simply lost all faith in the country's future. And for a dictatorship, that kind of quiet decay is way, way harder to fight.
And that, right there, is the ultimate takeaway. The fate of these seemingly small, almost insignificant local banks is actually tied directly to the fate of the entire political structure. The source is saying one simply cannot survive without the other.
And so that leaves us with one final, pretty chilling thought. The source draws a direct line from this financial death spiral we're seeing in China's local banks to the exact same kind of conditions that came right before the collapse of the Soviet Union. It's a heck of a question to end on, but one we have to ask. Is history about to repeat itself?